Some employers are subject to the Affordable Care Act, also referred to as ACA. They are therefore required to produce both a 1094-C and a 1095-C form. Your CenterPoint Payroll installation includes an integration to Atrix that will allow you to either print or electronically file those forms. The process of producing the ACA forms is broken into two separate videos. This is the first video in the series, and it will take you through the steps necessary within CenterPoint Payroll to set it up to allow you to produce those forms. The second video will walk you through the steps within Atrix to either print or electronically file the forms. The first step in the setup process within CenterPoint Payroll is done on the employer setup by going to Setup in Employers, or if you're integrated with one of our accounting software packages, it'll be Setup Payroll Details and Employers. For each employer that you need to set up the ACA information for, you'll edit the employer, and on the General tab is a section labeled ACA Insurance Information. If you provide family medical insurance coverage, you'll want to check the box at the top. The second checkbox will only be selected if you are providing self-insured coverage. In other words, you're providing the coverage for the employees and not using a third-party insurance company. If you do provide self-insured coverage, then you'll want to make sure that you select the correct origin for that coverage. For the 1094-C, you'll select the certifications of eligibility that apply to the coverage you have. For a little bit further description of those certifications of eligibility, you can find that information in our help file, which you can get to by clicking on the help button in the bottom right corner of the screen. I'm going to save the employer setup, and then the remaining portion of the ACA setup is done on the employee record. So we're going to go to Setup and Employees. I'm going to highlight my first employee and edit them. There is just one piece of information on the Payroll tab that I want you to be aware of, and that's in the bottom right corner of the screen. There's a little checkbox that says Consent to Electronic 1095. For the 1095s for each employee, you can either print them and send them to each employee, or you can send them electronically. If you're going to send them to the employees electronically only, then they also do need to sign a consent saying that they are willing to receive it electronically only. If they do sign that consent, then you'll want to check the box here, and that will tell Atrix that that employee is receiving an electronic only version of the 1095. There is a consent form that you can use within Atrix, and I'll show you that in a little while. Next, I'm going to go to the ACA Information tab. You'll first select the employer that you're setting up the ACA information for this employee, and then the plan start date. So my plan start date is January. Then I'm going to add a new coverage period, and I'm going to add it for the year 2025 with my starting date of January, and click OK. It's going to assume that the coverage period is for 12 months. If it isn't, then you can, if I needed to add like another coverage period within that year, I can do that. So say I need to add a second coverage period for that year, I could select the year and then choose a different start month. And what it does is it alters the first coverage period to be January through the month prior to where the second coverage period starts. Okay, I don't need that second coverage period, so I'm going to delete it, and it changes mine back to January through December. But I wanted to show you how you could add multiple coverage periods for the same year. On the right, for each coverage period, you'll highlight the coverage period. On the right, you'll choose whether or not that status of the employee was full-time, part-time, or not employed. You'll choose their offer method. For this employee, it's going to be minimum essential coverage. And then you'll want to enter in the employee share of the lowest cost monthly premium. That might not be the monthly premium that they select, but it is the lowest cost monthly premium. If any of the Section 4980H Safe Harbor codes apply to your employee, you'll want to select that code in the box. The bottom section of the setup here is where you would set up dependent information if you are self-insured. If you're not self-insured, you don't have self-insured coverage, you don't need to do that. But if you are self-insured, you'll need to enter in each dependent, and then you'll check whether or not they're going to be included in the coverage. Once you've set up your coverage information, if you want to copy that information to other employees, there's a couple of different ways to do that. The first way is right here on this screen. There is a copy to button. So I could copy the same coverage information to another employee or multiple other employees by moving them over to the right. I'm just going to select one right now and then click copy, and it copies the coverage information to that employee. I'm going to save this employee and we'll go in and edit that other employee just so you can see that it copied the information to that employee. So it did copy coverage information, but on the payroll tab, it did not copy the consent information. So you do need to still check that consent information. And if you were self-insured, you'd want to make sure that you put the dependent information in for each employee separately. There is another way to update the ACA information for multiple employees at one time, and that is through the Mass Update feature at the bottom of the screen. Under Mass Update, I'm going to click Next. There is a section called ACA where we can update ACA information for employees. Now, if you haven't set up their coverage periods yet, that's going to be the first thing that you want to do is establish that new coverage period. So I'm going to click Next. Now it assumes that I want to do this for all of my employees because I didn't select those employees first. So now, since I already have those coverage periods in for some of my employees, I might just want to highlight specific employees that I want to update the information for. Then I'm going to select the coverage year and then the start month, and then click Next. And it shows me that it's going to update the information for those employees. Click Next, and it adds that information to the database. Now I could finish this out, or if I need to update additional information, I could click New again, and it lets me get back to the ACA coverage information. If I need to change the plan start date for any of the employees, I could then come in and change the plan start date, select which employees I want to change the start period for, and then choose which period I want that to change it to. Now, once I've added the coverage period, I can now update the details of the coverage within that period for these employees by selecting last coverage period. And then I can select which detail I want to update. So if I need to update their status, for example, I could choose status and then choose which employees I want to update the status for. So let's say this employee and this employee are only part-time. So I can select them, click Next, and then update that information. Then I could go back to New, go to ACA information to last coverage period, and then I would be able to update the other information. So I could choose the offer. And since I haven't selected the offer method for these employees yet, I can choose which ones, what offer method I want to update. Now, I don't have to update all of the employees. Like I said, I could choose which ones I want to update the information for because they might not all have the same information. And then click Next. And again, I can continue doing that until I've updated all of the Affordable Care Act information for that employee. I'm going to click Cancel to get out of that form. Once you've set up all of your employees with their Affordable Care Act information, you can check the information on a report by going to Reports. And we're just going to type ACA into the search box, and it's going to bring up a list of reports that have to do with ACA. The two on the bottom are the reports that will allow you to see the information you have on the setup screens for those employees. So as an example, I'm going to choose this one called the Employee ACA Setup Detail, and I'm going to select the coverage period and then click Preview, and it's going to show me the details that I have set up for each of those employees. Both of those reports are similar, they just have different details. The other report at the top, labeled the ACA Full-Time Equivalent report, is going to allow you or allow employers to help determine whether or not they qualify as an ALE, which is an applicable large employer. By using timesheet information, it can calculate, whether or not you have the required number of employees to label you as an ALE, okay? And that is an employer with over 50 full-time employees. As you highlight the report, the description on the bottom right does give you a little bit of detail of how that is calculated within CenterPoint. I'm going to close that report. Now, before I show you where you go to get into Atrix, there is one preference that you might want to be aware of when you go to produce the reports, and that can be found underneath File and Preferences. There is a section called Federal and State Forms, and underneath that there is a preference that is called Preparer Designee. And on the Application tab, if you want the preparer information, or if you want the information you enter in the preparer information section on the forms to automatically be included, you could say yes here and then enter in the information on this screen, and it would automatically be included on the forms. The designee information is not needed for the 1094C or the 1095C. I'm going to click Save on that. To get to Atrix, you would go to Reports, Federal and State Payroll Forms, and for these federal forms, you would select the federal tax forms. When the screen comes up to produce one of the forms, you'll select the right employer. If you're doing the form and wanting to produce the form, you'll choose the normal method. And then in the box, the drop-down box, you'll select which form that you're producing. Now, I did talk about the consent forms. There is an electronic 1095 consent form that you can use and have the employees sign and then keep on file for those that are going to receive only an electronic copy of it. Otherwise, you'll see listed in the group of forms your 1095 and 1094C forms. The second video will take you through the process within Atrix here to produce those forms.